Yeah. hmm I'm just, this is a little slightly different. I like to switch it up. This would be a little slightly different than what I'm usually talking about. I just, obviously as a believer, I don't know why I got this hair all over my. It's not even my hair, man. What's happening here, man? I don't even know what's happening. It's like like hair is like magnetized. It's like you try to take it off and that thing just sticks to you, man. It's not even your hair. But anyway, I just wanted to do something a little different. I like to switch it up. Mostly my videos pertain to, just kind of thinking about things. Everything I try to think about from a biblical worldview, right? So, but there are times when I might post, let's walk through the scriptures and point something out. But I wanted to talk about something a little different today. Obviously, we are people. One of the things I appreciate about Paul in his day, was that Paul was a Christian, a Roman citizen, and a Jew. And Paul cared deeply about like the Jewish people. Like, Paul, in Romans 9, Paul essentially says, man, I wish I could give up my own salvation for these folks. So it wasn't like becoming a Christian somehow removes you from other aspects of your identity and that you just forsake those. Like, no, Paul was a Jew and Paul understood and cared about the Jewish people, but he knew that I got to go speak to the Gentiles. So this video will kind of function more like that for me. I'm a Christian, I'm a pastor. My identity is in Christ, but I'm also a black man. And I just wanted to share some thoughts that I had as I watched the Wakanda Forever trailer. It came back to my mind as I was watching it. So, and this will be less about the trailer and what it means. And I'm just saying, I'm not a Comic-Con dude. I'm going to walk you through, did you see this clip? But I just want to talk about Wakanda Forever and the trailer and what it reminded me of. So many of you've probably seen this already. So Black Panther 2 will be coming out in November. And obviously the main actor, Chadwick Boseman, last year died of colon cancer at age 43. He was T'Challa. And so there's been a lot of like what's going to happen with T'Challa and all of that type of stuff, right? So, but as I watched the trailer, it just reminded me of something. Two things in particular. One that's sad. Well, both are sad in some senses, but they can be redeemed. So, as I'm watching the trailer, it reminded me of. Well, I watched the trailer and then I saw a news clip and it reminded me of when Black Panther came out. It did 1.3 billion, and at the time when it dropped in 2018, it was the highest grossing, the fifth highest grossing movie for that in a weekend. It did very well in the theaters. And I remembered watching news clips of people all over the country. They were showing other countries, but it was largely in America. They were all over, and black people were going to see this movie in droves. Black people were going in droves, which I'll get to in a second. But what I saw was a lot of people were wearing like African garb. Like I'm talking about just regular old black people like me that don't necessarily identify largely with their African ancestry. But for whatever reason, when Black Panther first came out, black people were dressed in droves in garb, in African garb and things like that. And then I went and saw the movie. We all saw the movie, and it was good. Now, at that time, in 2018, a lot of the racial rhetoric was happening. By the time Black Panther came out, people were mocking it, calling it Wakanda and all this type of stuff, right? So it became like if you even care about anything black, it's considered woke, which I think is kind of ironic because, like I said when I started this video, Paul cared about his Jewish ancestry. Like Paul did not think because I'm a Christian now, me being Jewish doesn't matter. And I don't, but Christianity came. That's not the point. Paul didn't. He used his Roman citizenship. He cared about his ethnicity as a Jew, and all of those things, right? So as I'm watching Black Panther back in 2018, I was glad to see the movie, and it was shortly after Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith, before the slap, right? They led this hashtag Oscars so white boycott of the Oscars, which again was everything was thrown into like Wakanda and everything about being woke. If you say anything about racism, like somehow the gospel made it disappear from everyone. But the thing that struck me the most about Wakanda and the way black people responded was there was such a pride and an appreciation about the movie. And almost, I would say, and again, this is just my opinion, I'm not saying everyone thought this way, but there was almost a borderline idolatry of the movie. And let me tell you why I think this happened. I think that there were black people who almost, I'm not even going, this isn't even me being funny. This is a video, I'm not even going to be funny that much. There were people who were almost acting as if like Wakanda was a real place and wanting it to be a real place and acting and so grateful for the movie. And it dawned on me that, for many black people, not all, the psyche of the black experience of black people, not Africans who've come to this country since the civil rights era. I hate that argument. Oh, what about Nigerians and these people who come here? Well, they come here on the backs of the black people that were here. We paved the way for them to be accepted, right? But what I noticed was like, wow, the psyche of black people is so damaged that a fictional movie that shows black people with dignity, respect, prestige, and all these things meant so much to some black people that they almost treated Wakanda as if it was like a real city. And I think I want to say two things about what's happened here and what that actually means. One, I don't think enough credit is given to some of the psychological, even scientific, like epigenetics, like the study of transferable trauma and those things, right? I don't think enough credit is given to some black people who process their American historical journey differently. Not all black people feel this way, obviously, but not all people make it. I did a video not too long ago talking about Jesus said the poor you will always have with you. So it puzzles me when we shame people, black or whatever, for being poor, as if like everyone's supposed to be rich. And if you're not, then somehow you're not doing the right thing in America. That's theological. That's not biblical. But one of the things I feel like has happened over time and even the use of the term woke and saying everything that is brought up about race. And don't get me wrong, some people do go way overboard. I am not on the left or the right. I stay balanced. I will critique black culture as quick as a redneck would, and I will critique white culture as quick as the Black Power movement would, right? I'll hit all of them because I believe that there's deeds of darkness on all sides. But one of the things I've noticed as a black man, I've realized that in the evangelical church, a lot of the pain of it was almost like treating black people as if the struggles of being black, for some black people, not all, were somehow not real and somehow manipulated by the media. And that's really not true. And I think when Black Panther came out, the fact that so many black people took to this movie and saw it as a proud, like they were proud, not in a sinful way, but like excited about representation that didn't look like Africa was all jungles and no civilization and bones and noses and all of this stuff. It was actually sad on one level for me. There was a sense of, I get it, as a black man, I get it, but it was actually sad that, particularly among black Christians, that there was such an affinity for a fantasy movie that gave you dignity. Like, black people shouldn't need to find dignity in Marvel films. And a lot of that dignity is not because we're playing the victim or woke, but there are reverberating consequences and historical consequences, even in the church, for these things. It's interesting that, in 1995, the SBC made a resolution on racism, like a racial resolution. This 31 years after supposedly systemic racism ended with the civil rights legislation. And in that resolution, they said, and I mean, this was their own words, stuff that they would be called woke for now. This is what they said. I want to read to you just real quick, just a brief excerpt of their resolution on racism, which I thought was kind of crazy. This is the stuff now. If they said this now, they would be like, "Oh man, you guys are so woke. Y'all drinking coffee all day." But here's what they said: "Be it further resolved This is 1995, the SBC. So this is 150 years after the Southern Baptist Convention kind of started. And this was their way of saying, after 150 years, we want to say something. This is 1995 SBC resolution. Here's what they said. Be it further resolved that we lament and repudiate historic acts of evil such as slavery, from which we continue to reap a bitter harvest. This is 1995. And we recognize that the racism which yet plagues our culture today is inextricably tied to the past. And again, it's 1995 SBC resolution on racism. You can Google this and look this up. They said, be it further resolved that we apologize to all African Americans for condoning and or perpetuating individual and systemic racism in our lifetime, and we genuinely repent of racism which we have been guilty. This is the SBC, and they even quoted a couple passages to qualify their statements to say, we're getting this from the Bible. I thought it was so fascinating for a couple reasons. One, because I was in 1995, I was in the streets. I was a street dude. I was selling drugs. Leave the drugs and the cracks and the knives alone. MC Lights on the microphone. So I was self-destruction. I was out there in the streets. So I wasn't even aware of this. But I don't remember hearing a lot of noise about racial reconciliation. I mean, all the white privilege, all of that stuff wasn't there. This was the SBC's attempt after 150 years of being established to acknowledge something historic on their 150 year, and this is just really small. There's so much of it where they acknowledge the foundation of our family of churches, our denomination, was based on racism. The names of our people on our buildings, all this stuff. This is all 1995 stuff that they would be called woke for right now, saying that they agree with. You can look this up. What's interesting is that, like, it took the church, the SBC, the largest denomination in America at least, 31 years to acknowledge that after supposedly systemic racism ended. So the world ended it in 1964, but the church finally acknowledged it. They still are perpetuating it in 1995. I don't know how much has changed in the SBC since 95 till now. That's a different conversation. But I'm making a bigger point here, is that when I think about this was their acknowledgement. And I think about Wakanda Forever and thinking about Black Panther and how Black people were so enamored with the visual representation. It really just made me sad. And watching the trailer made me sad again, not because I miss T'Challa or because of the music and I wasn't in my feelings. It made me sad is that, wow, there's still such a damage to the Black psyche. The reverberating consequences of racism are still so apparent that Black people find solace and excitement in a false narrative, which is Wakanda. It's not a real city. It's not, well, Africa does not have, as far as we know, the most technologically advanced, minerals in the world. There's no vibranium there or anything like that, right? So, but the fact that Black people had to find so much hope in that was actually really sad to me. And it led me to another thing that's sad to me too, that I think what I'm about to say right now has contributed negatively to Black people more than Black people are willing to admit. I think this idea that we were kings and queens in Africa is sort of part of what made the Wakanda experience when Black Panther came out, something that not all Black people. So if you're not one of those Black, don't tell me, well, I don't feel that way. I don't want to hear that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying we're not monolithic. I understand that. But there are a lot of Black people who feel a particular way. And if you don't, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not saying all Black people. I don't speak for all Black people. No one does. No one does. Having said that, that's my last qualification. I think there's a sense that we were kings and queens in Africa has actually done significant damage to Black people making progress in America. That's just not true. And I think that allowed when Black Panther came out, and it was just, I remember going to the movie theaters. We live in a Black county, live in PG County, Maryland, right outside of DC. And me and my boys, we go see Marvel films all the time. Now there's a newer theater where mostly white people go to that theater in Crofton, Maryland. And every movie is packed. These white people love superhero movies, right? I do too though, so they just white people. But them folks, they'll dress up like everything. Every Star Wars, they be out there looking like it's Comic-Con. We don't go to that theater. We go to the gangster joint. We go up the street. We go there, the old seats. You can't sit back enough, and I'm all big, trying to slide into the seat, fitting in. We just go to the gangster joint, right? We've never seen the theater packed like that. But boy, when we pulled up for it was so many black people out there. And it was almost a celebration of something that I think is actually not true. Not only is Wakanda not true, but I think black people have told ourselves that we were kings and queens in Africa. And that's really not true. It's created a false identity among black people that we were kings and queens in Africa and then were stolen by white people, so to speak. No, there were kings and queens in Africa, no question. Even in Wakanda, if you watch Black Panther, if you notice, it wasn't like you saw the people a lot. There was a scene where T'Challa was walking with Naomi, I think her name was, in through Wakanda, and it was like a marketplace. But it wasn't like everyone was a king and queen in Wakanda. You had M'Baku, which was like the monkey king and all of that, the big dude, and you had T'Challa and a couple people. But it wasn't like everyone was a king and queen. But I think in the reverberating consequences of being mistreated for centuries made some people tell this lie that we were kings and queens in Africa, and black people have believed that, and it has actually been to our detriment. Because we felt like, because if we can be kings and queens and be taken by just average people from another country, then one, it gives us sort of a mindset that says like we can't persevere. We stuck. We don't do it. And even though black people have done a lot to progress, I think believing that we were kings and queens in Africa has actually done a major disservice to the black community, because it's not true. There were kings and queens in Africa, just like there still are. There were kings and queens in Wakanda, but everyone wasn't a king or a queen. We were just average black folks, just ordinary people. And there were black people that sold black people to white people. I recently talked to a brother who told me about this place in South Africa where they do a sort of a sobering, not a celebration is the wrong word, like a memorial service for them selling their countrymen, other Africans, to Europeans, which created the transatlantic slave trade. So it's not even a true narrative that white people just went over and took over. Like, listen, white people wasn't just coming into Africa and taking over all these people without people being able to. That's not really true. There may be some truth to that, but black people sold black people. But we have this impression, some people, we were kings and queens in Africa. And I think it's actually created a psychological damage that hasn't allowed some people to really press through and progress in the ways that they could have. I think that's just not true. And I think if we're going to be honest about these things, like Christians, right? I'm a believer. I care about truth. I care about all truth is God's truth. Somebody said that. I don't know who it was, but I care about truth. And so I want to know truth, and then I'll deal with the truth. And I think a lot of that, we see the idolatry of a lie, like we're kings and queens. And I hear people saying, now, what's up, king? What's up, king? What's up, queen? Like talking like that to build up self-esteem. I don't want my self-esteem built on something that's not true. I don't need that. I want self-esteem that's rooted in something true. And this is where I think the church is, in one sense, the answer, like where our identity is built on truth. I really believe. I was in a conversation today with this guy who rejects the Bible, and he told me essentially that there's discrepancies in the resurrection narrative that is a black dude that make it difficult for him, and I'm creating a false dichotomy or something by believing it. I said, bro, even if you could prove that, even if it were true that stuff is like certain things about the Bible were not true, there's discrepancies, that's a lie. Like, I'd rather believe that lie than the lie that you're telling. Like, I would, because there's no consequences for not believing it if what you're saying is true. Like, I don't understand. Like, I'd rather believe the lie that the Bible presents. Now, I don't think it's a lie. I'm using the logic that he said. But I'd rather believe the lie that the Bible presents than to believe the logic that you're giving me, because there's no foundation, no basis for that. And I've seen a lot of black people have problems with Christianity, not because there's really a real problem with Christianity, but because the identity of black people after becoming a Christian was so shattered for so long. And so again, I don't have a real angle with this video. I'm just going to share with y'all how I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. You either like it or you don't. I'm good with whatever. But I do think as I watch that Wakanda trailer and anticipate Black Panther coming out in November, I'm definitely going to see it. I go see the Marvel movies. I'm not. You saw my Disney joint. I'm not giving up on Marvel because of Disney's agenda just yet. So I'm gonna see it, but I anticipate one, more idolatry of a false identity that we're kings and queens, and two, more slurs of Wakanda and all these things coming from actual believers. And I just think, Paul cared about his ethnicity as a Jew and used his Roman citizenship to benefit him in his travels and his missionary work. Just because our primary identity isn't our ethnicity or where we're from or any of that. I'm sorry. Somebody made a comment that I'm going to put this up. Thomas Sowell talks about similar things as well and some of the ideas of slavery in history. Yeah, I actually think Thomas Sowell was brilliant, but I have a lot of problems with Thomas Sowell. I'll just say one real quick, just because this comment came in. Thomas Sowell, to me, from my reading of like black rednecks and white, whatever, I think liberals or something, his founding premise is that black people's issues are cultural issues. So basically, we've inherited redneck culture from the Southern white folks and from the British. And we took that when we migrated from the South to the North, we took that with us. And so then in the 60s, when Lyndon Johnson passed the great, the New Deal was Roosevelt. I forgot what Lyndon Johnson's was. It was called the Great Something. But when they passed that legislation, then black people just kind of quit. And so Thomas Sowell does not see any black issues as structural or systemic, but primarily cultural. Here's my problem with Thomas Sowell in that particular argument. And I'm just going to say this because this isn't a video about Thomas Sowell. So black people took redneck culture and migrated it to the North in Chicago and Detroit and those countries. And the Great Migration started, there were two Great Migrations, right? The first one started in like the 1890s. And then there was another one in like the 1920s or 30s, where all black people just going north, getting out of the South because of Jim Crow laws. If black people inherited redneck culture in the late 1800s and then traveled with them, then why didn't the dynamics of that redneck culture show up until the 60s? Thomas Sowell will also say that the black family was stronger in 1940s, stronger in the 50s, and he blames the weakness of it on the legislation of the 60s and then black culture that's redneck. But if that's true, then why did redneck culture not show up for 2 generations after it was inherited? That just doesn't make sense. You are who you are, wherever you are, whenever you are. So I just have a lot of problems with Thomas Sowell's a brilliant dude and says some stuff, but I think white evangelicals latched on to him because they latch on to anybody that says negative things about black people. Even sometimes they're true, sometimes they're not altogether true. Let's just be honest. It's complicated, right? Can we just acknowledge that it's complicated? It's not as simple as blacks are playing the victim or systemic racism did all that. It's complicated. And I just wish people would just be like, you know what? This is complicated. It's more complicated. And these oversimplifications that Thomas Sowell has made have only pegged. That's where the Uncle Tom stuff comes from. It comes from that. So in the Uncle Tom documentary, they said they're shaming black people for voting Democrat and then say in the documentary that Republicans don't want the black vote. So it's like, why shame black people for voting in a way that you acknowledge they don't want them to vote with them? So it's complicated. And so I think a lot of the stuff that's happening, what we're going to see blow up again, is the reality that there are reverberating consequences that black people feel. Not all black people feel that way, but we feel that way. And some of it came from the church. And the fact that the church acknowledged 31 years after the world that it was wrong on racism is actually shocking to me. While I appreciate it, it's shocking. And so I just think, I agree with this. I agree. Too many nuances might be true for some, but not all. 100%. I just think we have to acknowledge that. This stuff is more complicated. And I don't think the church has done the best job at making it less complicated. I think we've just kind of used these monolithic terms. It's easier to just say, "Oh, you brought this up. You're woke," or you support white supremacy," and it's like, fam, it's way more complicated than that. Way more complicated. So, I just think Wakanda represents. I mean, as a black man, I'm grateful for it, but I think it represents the and the reason why some black people latch onto it is it reveals the psychological damage that has been done to the black psyche for people who have grown up in America, has been done to many people, and we find hope in fantasies like Wakanda, and I hope that us as believers, that we're able to present that Christianity is not a fantasy, and I hope that we're able to really have the kind of compassion and love for people. And because here's the thing about nuances require grace to give people the benefit. To Jesus provided grace. He'd walk. What did Jesus cry for when he knew he was going to bring Lazarus back from the dead? Have you ever thought about that? What in the world did Jesus weep for? Oh, two words, Jesus wept, right? What did he weep for when he knew, I'm about to raise this man from the dead, and y'all gonna see the greatest thing you've ever seen in your life? And I'm not. When my kids are upset and I got a big surprise getting ready to bless them, I'm not crying with them. I'm laughing because I know I'm getting ready to change their world. But Jesus wept with those folks. Like, he understood the complexity of human emotion. He understood the sadness and the grief was real, even though he was about to change it. And from my vantage point, a lot of Christians on the left and the right, they've just forgotten that this stuff is real for people. This stuff isn't just, people don't get their worldviews just from watching TikTok and leftist narrative agenda in the media. They get their experiences from some of the things that they've gone through and some of the trauma and hurt that has never really been dealt with and has been sort of broad brushed as woke or white privilege. Or it's more real than that. And I think if we're going to be honest and really do something about it, we have to deal with the complexity of it. It's just not. It's some, not all, as Zesty Sexaw said. It's not overwhelmingly everyone who votes Republican isn't a white supremacist, and everyone who votes Democrat isn't. It's just more complicated than that. And I think if we've lost nuance, and in nuance is grace. Grace, Psalm 103, 10 through 12. He remembers how we are formed, that we are only dust. Like he understood. When it was said to Jesus, he knew the heart of them. In John 6, when they wanted him to become king, it was like Jesus knew what was in the heart of a man, right? He understood that. So do we. We know what's in we don't know what people are thinking in the moment, but we have an anthropology that comes from the Bible that tells us this is what's happening in the heart of people. We've inherited a definition of good and evil that rivals Adam and Eve, all of those things. So I just think we need to think about these things. And I just wanted to share this. Some of my videos aren't going to be deep insights from the Bible. Some of them are just going to be just real talk. This is just, hey, Paul cared about his ethnicity as a Jew, and it concerned him related to all of it. I care about black people as a black man. At times, there are times when it's like, man, I wish this wasn't happening. I wish this idea wasn't out there. And I wish more people recognize, this is way more complicated than we give it credit for. So anyway, Wakanda forever. I'll see it, but I ain't going to be in no dashikis. I can tell you that. I'll tell you that right now. I'm not spilling no popcorn on that dashiki. All right, man, I appreciate y'all. Thanks so much for your comments. Thanks for your follows. Thanks for your subscribes. All of it, man. I appreciate you. Thank you. Hopefully this was helpful in some way, shape, or form for you. I'm not looking to fight. I've studied this stuff well. If you're going to come at me hard, you better know your stuff, because I know my stuff. Don't tell me what I debated Vody Bach, all these people. I know my stuff. So, but I'm not here to put up a fight and pick a side. I'm just here to share some observations that I think are valid based on my perception. So, having said that, I will see you when I see y'all. Appreciate you guys so much. If you like what you hear here or any other video, obviously like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the algorithm and all of that. Here I debated Vody Bach 100%. And I walked out of there with the belt over my shoulder. Walked out of there. You can find it on Wrath and Grace's website. It's called Christ and Culture too. That was a good time. Even Vody acknowledged it. Vody said that himself. Vody said that. But that's a different thing. Anyway, appreciate y'all. Thank you. All of it. Go with God. All right. See you.